The first crackle of gravel under my tires felt like a memory coming back to life. After nearly a year away, I had finally returned to my grandfather's lakeside cabin, a modest, pine-framed structure tucked deep in the trees, overlooking the glassy stillness of Lake Windermere. The air smelled of wet bark and nostalgia. Nothing had changed, and yet everything around it had. Where there had once been forest trails and fishing shacks, now stood rows of sterile beige homes, identical, down to the porch chairs. Signs stamped with Windermere Shores HOA dotted the curbs like warning flags. Surveillance cameras, speed bumps, community patrols. It was no longer a lakeside retreat. It was a manicured fortress, but my cabin. It remained untouched, untouchable. Parked beside the dock where I used to cast lines with my grandfather, stepped out of my truck, and stretched. That's when I heard her heels sharp, impatient taps cutting through the pine needles. "You can't park here," she snapped. I turned. She was in her 50s, perfectly coiffed with a clipboard hugged to her chest like a shield. Her eyes were narrowed behind oversized sunglasses, her lips pursed with manufactured authority. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to. I already knew who she was. "Karen," I said with a polite nod. She blinked, startled. "How? Do you know my name?" "Lucky guess." Karen inched forward, pointing toward the cabin with her pen. "This is private HOA property. Residents only. You need to turn around and leave." I stayed still, letting the silence speak. "My name's Lucas Granger. This cabin's mine." Her jaw tightened. "Impossible. Every property around this lake is under HOA jurisdiction. This is Windermere Shores, not this patch," I said, gesturing toward the aged structure framed by moss and memory. "My grandfather built it in 1957. Before the HOA, before any of this. It's deeded separately. I'm not part of your community, and I don't answer to it." Karen looked like I'd slapped her with a trout. "That's absurd. I've personally reviewed the plats. All lakeside parcels are included. You missed one." She pulled out her phone, lips already curled in triumph. "Then I'll let the sheriff sort it out." I stepped aside. "Be my guest." As she marched off, furiously tapping 911, I walked up to the cabin's porch and brushed pine needles from the old wooden swing. The wood groaned beneath me as I sat. From here I could see her pacing near the HOA's decorative signpost, glancing back at me like I was a live grenade someone had misplaced in her tulip bed. I should have been angry, but I wasn't. I was ready, because Karen wasn't just another nosy neighbor playing pretend police. She was the president of the Windermere Shores HOA, the very same board that had, in the past 2 years, sent 3 cease and desist letters to a man they didn't know, trying to bully me into compliance. I had ignored them, not out of arrogance but patience. See, I'm not just a cabin owner, I'm a land rights attorney. And for the past 11 months, I'd been quietly watching from afar as the HOA made mistake after mistake, claiming jurisdiction, sending illegal notices, even filing a fake zoning complaint with the county clerk. I had documented everything, because I knew this day would come. And now, as I sat on my rightful porch watching Karen wave down the approaching sheriff cruisers like she was summoning cavalry, I smiled. Let them come. I wasn't just returning to the lake. I was about to burn their paper empire to the ground with the law as my match. The first sheriff's cruiser rolled up exactly 6 minutes after Karen's 911 call. The second followed 30 seconds later. She waved them down like a runway marshal, flailing her arms, already mid-rant before the deputy even got his door. "Open, that's him," she shouted, jabbing her pen toward me like a dagger. "He's trespassing on HOA property. I want him removed immediately." The younger officer, Deputy Keller, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The older one, Sergeant Rodriguez, approached me calmly, resting a hand on his belt. "You, Lucas Granger." "That's right," I replied, handing him a yellow envelope. "Original land deed. Signed by the county registrar in 1957. Not under HOA jurisdiction." Rodriguez read it slowly, carefully, his eyebrows lifted. "This checks out." Karen's heels clicked over, loud and sharp. "What do you mean it checks out?" "I've seen the plats. Every inch around the lake is Windermere Shores." Rodriguez turned toward her. "Not this inch. According to this deed and county records, Mr. Granger's property was excluded from the original development agreement. It's not under your HOA." She laughed bitterly as if the truth were some kind of punchline. "That can't be. Our covenants apply to everyone who lives here." "Not him," Keller said flatly. "He's not in your HOA. That means your rules don't apply." Karen's face turned a shade darker. Her voice sharpened. "So you're telling me this man can just waltz in here? Pitch a tent? Build a circus? Burn garbage on his lawn and there's nothing we can do?" Rodriguez held up the deed again. "He's not pitching tents. He's sitting on his grandfather's legal property. End of story." "But what about the road? He drove through our private entrance." "County maintained," Keller interjected. "Not your jurisdiction." Her mouth opened, closed. She stood there blinking, suddenly aware that her kingdom didn't stretch as far as she'd always believed. For the first time, she looked less like a queen and more like a child who just found out the rules of the board game had changed mid-play. I watched her calm as ever, because this wasn't the first time she'd tried to flex her paper-thin power a year earlier. I'd received a letter from the Windermere Shores HOA informing me I owed $600 in back dues. For what, it didn't say. When I ignored it, another letter followed, this time threatening legal action. The kicker, I wasn't even on their mailing list. They'd sent it to a random P.O. box they assumed belonged to me. That was the moment. I knew they weren't just overreaching, they were sloppy, entitled, dangerous. I didn't respond. I waited. And while they tightened their little net of rules around everyone else, I gathered every document they'd falsified. Every threatening letter, every zoning map they revised to conveniently include my lot, they thought. I was a harmless cabin dweller, but I wasn't just defending my land. I was preparing to dismantle theirs. Karen was still arguing with the officers as I walked past her, slow and deliberate, back toward the cabin. "You haven't heard the last of this," she yelled behind me. "I'll take it to the board. I'll take it to the board." Turned, just once, and smiled. "Please do," because the board was exactly where I wanted her. Let her gather her allies. Let her write her memos and hold her emergency meetings. Let her post her passive-aggressive notices and call in every favor she thought she had, because none of them would matter when the county got my evidence, and when they did, her HOA wouldn't just lose its power, it would lose its right to exist. By the following morning, 3 violation notices had been pinned to my truck windshield, all unsigned, all bearing the gold crest of the Windermere Shores HOA. The first cited unauthorized occupancy. The second accused me of non-compliant exterior aesthetics. The third claimed I was interfering with community harmony. I nearly laughed. None of it held legal weight, but that wasn't the point. Karen wasn't trying to enforce rules. She was trying to scare me off. And to her credit, the scare tactics had worked on others. I walked into the nearby town diner that afternoon looking for a bite, but also for answers, and found both. Locals were easy to spot. Sun-creased skin, calloused hands, the kind of people who built lives, not just houses, but they spoke in hushed tones about the HOA like it was some invisible regime. "You're the cabin guy?" a man asked, sliding onto the bar stool beside me. Mid-60s veteran hat, name was Cole. "That's me," I said. "Lucas." He looked around, then leaned in. "They fined me $150 a week for flying the flag," said the pole was unauthorized vertical signage. "I told them I fought in 2 wars for that flag. They said that didn't matter, it violated line-of-sight cohesion." His voice cracked with equal parts disbelief and anger. Another woman chimed in from a nearby booth. "They banned my therapy dog from the walking path, called her a nuisance animal. She's a licensed service dog for PTSD." The floodgates opened. A retired schoolteacher fined for planting native flowers. A mechanic forced to hide his toolbox because it disturbed the neighborhood aesthetic. A single mom who missed 1 payment on her dues and came home to find a lien notice on her door. The more I listened, the clearer it became. Windermere Shores wasn't a community, it was a kingdom, and Karen ruled it like a medieval duchess. And now, she was trying to annex what didn't belong to her. I returned to the cabin that evening and opened the folder I'd kept in a locked chest for over a year. Inside were the originals. Survey maps, dating back to 1956, county zoning approvals stamped and notarized, 3 letters from the HOA claiming I owed dues on land they had no right to govern, 1 falsified map, mysteriously revised last spring, showing my cabin plot shaded in HOA colors. It was all the proof I needed. I spent the next 48 hours compiling a formal petition to the County Land Commission. My claim was simple. Windermere Shores HOA had repeatedly violated local laws by attempting to annex and govern land that lay outside its legal boundaries, and I wasn't the only one. Using a pseudonym, I joined the HOA's private Facebook group. It took less than a day to find dozens of residents with their own horror stories. I messaged them privately, carefully, legally. I wasn't just building a case, I was building a coalition. By the end of the week, I had a digital folder containing 14 screenshots of Karen threatening residents with fabricated fines, 6 voice recordings of board members admitting to manipulating rulebooks, a signed affidavit from a former HOA secretary who had quit in protest. With that, I sent the final file to the county auditor, the zoning department, the commissioner's office, and the state HOA oversight board. It was no longer about me and my cabin, it was about all of us. On Friday afternoon, a black SUV pulled into Windermere Shores. County officials stepped out with clipboards and badges. They weren't there for coffee and conversation. I watched from my porch as they approached Karen's door. She answered in full regalia, pearls, blazer, HOA badge still proudly pinned. Her posture stiffened when they handed her the folder. She flipped it open. Her lips moved as she read the heading: "Petition to suspend HOA operations pending legal review." She looked up first, confused, then angry, then afraid. The Queen had just been served, and the court of public opinion was only just beginning to gather. 3 days after the county officials served Karen the legal petition, the HOA boardroom that once echoed with her demands fell silent. An emergency meeting was held that Wednesday only. It wasn't at the clubhouse that had been temporarily sealed off by order of the county, pending a forensic audit. Instead, the board scrambled to meet in the backyard of a disgruntled treasurer, surrounded by folding chairs and finger-pointing. Half the members didn't show, and the ones who did, they were nervous. News had spread fast. Every HOA violation, every manipulated document, every intimidation tactic now public record. The county's legal review team released an initial report citing over a dozen counts of overreach, 5 procedural violations, and 1 criminal referral for falsification of land records. That referral had Karen's name on it. Her reign unraveled, faster than even I expected. One by one, board members resigned, their names scrubbed from the HOA's website. Residents began openly questioning every fee, every rule. The community newsletter went dark. The flag fines were dropped. The liens reversed. The enforcement committee disbanded. Karen, however, refused to go quietly. She tried hosting an impromptu community defense forum from her front porch, yelling through a portable microphone about property values and outsiders. But no one came. Her neighbors walked their dogs on the opposite sidewalk. Some, like Cole, openly waved at me as they passed, smiling for the first time in years. The county made it official 2 weeks later. Windermere Shores HOA was suspended indefinitely, its powers revoked, its accounts frozen, pending a class action settlement. A state-level auditor would determine whether the HOA should be dissolved. Entirely Karen's last desperate move came the morning after that announcement. I heard the tires crunching the gravel drive just after dawn. I stepped outside, coffee mug in hand, and saw her standing beside my truck with a single sheet of paper. She looked tired. Her blazer was wrinkled. The pearls were gone. "I'm filing a restraining order," she said. I sipped my coffee. "On what grounds?" "You've harassed the HOA, undermined our governance." "You mean exposed your misconduct?" She didn't answer, just held out the paper with trembling fingers. "But I didn't take it, Karen," I said quietly. "This land was never yours to govern. You crossed the line the moment you tried to control what you didn't own. All I did was pull the curtain back." She looked at me then, not with anger, but something else. Defeat, maybe even fear. "You destroyed everything," she whispered. "No," I said. "You did that. I just gave it a name." She left without another word. The paper floated to the ground. It wasn't a restraining order. It was blank. That evening I walked down to the lakeshore as the sun dipped behind the pines. The wind was calm. The water mirrored the sky, glowing gold and soft blue. Peaceful. Finally, Cole and a few other neighbors joined me at the dock. One of them handed me a cold beer. No words needed, just nods, gratitude. Across the lake, Karen's porch was empty. By month's end, a new community group had formed, informal volunteer run. No fines, no threats, just neighbors, helping neighbors. The first thing they did was take down the wrought iron Windermere Shores HOA sign and replace it with a wooden one, carved by hand, that read simply, "Lake Windermere, no kings, no queens, just home." I stood on my porch beneath the cabin lights, the same ones my grandfather strung up 60 years ago, and watched the new sign sway gently in the breeze. Justice didn't always come loudly. Sometimes it arrived in the sound of silence after the storm had passed.